Welcome back to the Bill and Ray Show. I'm Bill, and today we're set up in the brew house, and I'm going to start a batch of beer. And the first thing I need to get going is a yeast starter. We're going to be putting it in a flask, 500 milliliters of water, about 52 grams of DME, the dry malt extract, and we're going to add a little yeast nutrient. We've got our Safe Ale US 05 is our yeast we're going to be using, and I'm going to put all that into a kettle and boil the water and sterilize this for a little bit of while I'm getting other things set up. We've got software running on the computer, running Beersmith, that helps me get my ingredients figured out, determines the color and the outcome of the beer, the strength of it, and the bitterness, and it really is a great little program. You have to pay a little bit for it, but it helps me out a lot. So let's get to it. The starter solution is going to stay in some boiling water for 15 or 20 minutes, and that will sterilize the solution as well as the vessel. We'll mix up some sanitizer. I'm using Star San. In about a gallon of water, I need just a quarter tablespoon. That'll help later on to sanitize some of our tools. Right now we've got our scissors and our yeast pack. After we cool down our solution to 90 degrees or less, we're going to add our yeast. It's a safe temperature now. It'll get going real fast. We'll put it on our stir plate for the rest of the day until we need to add it at the very end. So I'm using a flour mill grinder actually. It's not ideal for crushing grain, but you set it really loose and it does a pretty good job. It gets a little bit more flour than you want in there. You don't want that really, but that's what I've got. It's not the greatest, but it works. I have commercial hops that I'll be using today in my recipe. They each need to be weighed out and put into muslin bags to be ready to add to the boil at the required times. But I also have some of my own hops growing in the yard. This is springtime, so they're just started out, and we've got a dog kennel that surrounds them and gives them support as they're growing up. Works out pretty good. Okay, we're going to start boiling some water. So we've got some water really hot, and I've got a dipstick here that's marked off for this pot. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4 gallons. I need 4.3 or 4 for this initial. So that's pretty close to the right amount of water. It's way too hot, but we'll put the hot water in the mash tun, and then we'll get the temperature down to 164 where I need it by taking out some hot water and putting in some cold water. This is our mash tun we're using, a little cooler. And instead of trying to get that all the way up there, we'll just use a pitcher and move some of this hot water in here. I've just found it's better to start with hot water and cool it down. But otherwise, your hot water winds up not being hot enough. Temperature is pretty important to get really close. Okay, our initial temperature is about 164 where we want it. We can start mashing in. So we take our grains that we've ground up. And we're going to add these slowly, stir them in. Don't want to have clumps, too many big chunks in here. Looks like we stayed up at 152 or 3 degrees quite well. So initially we're going to add another bit of water. That's hotter. And that's going to help warm up the sugars and mix this up a little bit. So we can start draining off some of our wort. It's going to start off with a lot of particles in it. Do a little bit of this. Recycling some of the water until we get that filter bed running pretty well. So they'll say you want it to run clear. Well, obviously this is pretty dark stuff, so clear is a relative term. You just don't want it to be full of a lot of particulate. That's really not too bad. So we're going to go ahead and hook up our hose. And start draining off our first running. Okay, so we've got our first running off pretty good, but the bed is pretty stuck at this point. So we got our what could be fly sparge water, but we're going to need to add some of this and loosen up that grain bed. I'm going to wind up using a good bit of this to try and get our flow started again. So I'm going to stir up the grain bed. We're going to have to go back to recycling some of this. Kind of keep the water at the top of the grain bed. theory, the hot water on top is just fresh water. It's coming down through and pushing the sugars out the bottom. Running pretty good. Use our refractometer to see where we're at. About 0.19. Kind of rushing this sparging. The efficiency is not going to be super high, but we're going to get most of it. Okay, going to start boiling. At this stage we can lose a little bit of the sludge in the bottom. And there we go, we're starting to boil. So we're starting with about 6.5 gallons in here to start with. Hopefully end up with a 5-gallon batch. So we'll check the pre-boil gravity. We're a little low, it's 1.048, target was 1.052. Efficiency was a little off today, but kind of ran through that sparge a little fast. But we got it in the pot, it'll make beer. And it looks like we're about ready to boil. The first time it comes up to the boil, it can easily boil over. So you have to stir it and watch your heat. You're ready to cut the heat down. Cut the heat down a little bit. See if we can avoid shutting the heat completely off. Let it boil until it splashed on the floor a bit. Then it should calm down and start just making a rolling boil without boiling over. As soon as it's settled down, we need to add our 60-minute hop addition. An ounce of Cascade. And I've got 8 ounces of corn flake. So those are going to stay in the boil for the whole hour. Okay, we're about a half hour into our boil. Add the flavor hops. The first edition is a bittering hops. These will add a little bit of flavor. Mosaic hops, I haven't used these before. And then temperatures were a little bit high in the mash, and we wound up with a little less volume in the pre-boil, and the gravity was a little low. So I decided I'm going to add another pound of honey mixed up with some water, and adding it at this stage may get a little bit of residual honey flavor in there. A little hint of it anyway, which is okay because I've got some honey malt that I used, so I'm kind of looking for that note anyway. So this is some of our honey from here on the farm, some commercial honeybees. And I haven't tried this before, so this will be another good little experiment. That's what making your own beer is all about. You get to decide to do different things, even sometimes if it's on the fly. And we'll see how our gravity's doing here. So we're up 157 or so. So we're down to our last 15 minutes of boil. We're going to add our last hops. This is a Citra Hops, 1 ounce for an aroma addition. And at the same time we're going to put in our chill coil to sterilize it. And I'm going to also put in a tablet to help with clearing out the solids. These tablets will help clarify our wort, and certainly once the first ferment is done, it'll make a big difference. So this phase, we're cooling off with our coil immersed in the wort, and we're just running cold water in. It's coming out. Initially it is hot, hot, hot. So we want to cool it down as quickly as possible to avoid the off flavors, and we really want to get the yeast going as soon as possible. The longer it's here in a condition that anything can get in here and start growing, that's just a risk we don't really need. So the goal here is to bring down the temperature as soon as possible, and then we've got to get all our floating debris out of there as well. Okay, we're done chilling. right now, we add sanitizer in our first ferment bucket. Empty that out. Save this for next step later. Go ahead and add our yeast. Don't pour in the stir stick. And our top and our airlock has been soaking with sanitizer. Put our lid on. So we don't need the cork. And we should be good to start fermenting. We'll check it tomorrow morning and see how we're bubbling. So it's the next day and it's bubbling pretty good, and we've got it wrapped with our heating blanket, and it's hooked up to our temperature controller that's cycling a little bit of heat. It's slightly cool in here. So it's set to maintain temperature at 68 degrees. I can put some insulation panels around it to kind of help hold in the heat if it's too cold in here, but it's starting to get springtime, so it should be pretty good. In the summertime, we put this into a refrigerator and set the controller to cool it, to keep it from getting too hot. So it's looking pretty good today. Welcome back to the Bill and Ray Show. I'm Bill, and today we're set up in the brew house, and I'm going to start a batch of beer. We've got a yeast starter to get started,